Hi everyone, what an exciting morning we've had. And now I'm going to read from the New International Reader's Version, 1 Samuel 8 and 9 to verse 2. And it's all about Israel asking for a king and Samuel anointing a king. So from chapter 8. When Samuel became old, he appointed his sons as Israel's leaders. The name of his oldest son was Joel, and the name of his second son was Abijah. They served as judges at Beersheba. But his sons didn't live as he did. They were only interested in making money. They accepted money from people who wanted special favours. They made things that were wrong appear to be right. So the elders of Israel gathered together, and they came to Israel at Ramah, and they said to him, "You are old. Your sons, they don't live as you do, so appoint a king to lead us. We want a king just like the kings all the other nations have." Samuel wasn't pleased when they said, "Give us a king to lead us." So he prayed to the Lord. The Lord told him, "Listen to everything the people are saying to you. You are not the one they have turned their backs on. I am the one that they do not want. I am the one that they do not want as their king. They are doing just as they have always done. They have deserted me and served other gods. They have done that from the time I brought them out of Egypt until this day. Now they are deserting you too. Let them have what they want, but give them a strong warning. Let them know what the king who rules over them will expect to be done for him." Samuel told the people who were asking him for a king everything the Lord had said. Samuel told them, "Here's what the king who rules over you will expect you to be done for him. He will take your sons. He'll make them serve with his chariots and horses. They will run in front of the chariots. He'll choose some of your sons to be commanders of thousands of men. Some will be commanders of 50s. Others will have to plough his fields and gather his crops. Still others will have to make weapons of war and parts for his chariots. He'll also take your daughters. Some will have to make perfume. Others will be forced to cook and bake. He will take away your best fields and vineyards and olive groves. He'll give them to his attendants. He will take 1/10 of your grain and 1/10 of your grapes. He'll give it to his officials and attendants. He will also take your male and female servants. He'll take your best cattle and donkeys. He'll use them all any way he wants to. He will take 1/10 of your sheep and goats. You yourselves will become his slaves. When that time comes, you will cry out for help because of the king you have chosen. But the Lord won't answer you at that time." In spite of what Samuel said, the people refused to listen to him. "No," they said, "we want a king to rule over us. Then we'll be like all the other nations. We'll have a king to lead us. He'll go out at the head of our armies and fight our battles." Samuel heard everything the people said. He told the Lord about it. The Lord answered, "Listen to them, give them a king." Then Samuel said to the Israelites, "Each one of you go back to your own town." And then it says, Samuel appoints Saul to be Israel's king. There was a man named Kish from the tribe of Benjamin, and Kish was a very important person. He was the son of Abiel, the son of Zerah, and Zerah was the son of Becheroth, the son of Appiath, from the tribe of Benjamin. Kish had a son named Saul. Saul was a handsome young man. He was more handsome than anyone in Israel, and he was a head taller than anyone else. Thank you.
I don't know if that's in the middle, sorry. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Yes, we still have a sermon to do. It's a short one, I promise. Just give me a sec. I've got the bottom of my microphone in the back pocket. Anyway, okay. We have been doing a new curriculum, or newish. It's, we're halfway through the year now, so it's not really new, but a curriculum in Kids Church that we follow every now and then. It comes into our regular service when I'm preaching. And then this term in Kids Church, the kids have been learning about the history of God's people, Israel. So in the first half of the year, they started from the beginning of the Bible, and they heard stories, and we all, I've been in there too, so we heard stories about how God made the earth and made people, about Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, who were the first people that God called, and about Moses, who helped God free Israel from being slaves in Egypt. But now we're up to the point where God's people have been given the law. So that's the teachings about how they should live so that they actually look like God's people. And they also have been given the land that God promised they would live in. So they're in the promised land. But as we're learning, life hasn't become magically easy for God's people. They were actually, in the Bible, we hear so much about Israel, we sometimes forget that they were actually quite a small country, a small family, in a big world with big enemies. They were often threatened by the nations around them. And even though God sent them heroes, those are people that we call judges, the heroes who could save them from dangerous enemies, the people were still afraid. They wanted comfort and security, and so they asked God for a king. Well, as we've heard in our reading this morning, the people's request for a king was upsetting for Samuel and for God. Now, Samuel was a prophet. That's someone who hears from God and shares God's instructions and words with the people. But he was also trained as a priest, and he was sort of acting as the judge. So he was prophet, priest, judge. He was like leading the people at that time. And God and Samuel had a big discussion about what to do about the people's request for a king. God tells Samuel, we'll give them a king, but you need to warn the people about what having a king will mean for them. So that's what Samuel does. It was in our reading. Did you notice the warning? It was the bit about the king taking their sons and taking their daughters and their land and their grain and a bunch of other things. I don't know about you, but while I was reading this story, when I was getting ready to preach, I had a lot of questions about this warning. Because at first, I didn't really understand how it fit in. I was a little bit confused. See, for a long time, I thought the bad thing about having a king, the bad thing about Israel having a king, was that the king can take the place of God. God is Israel's leader. They need to trust God to take care of them. But when they get a king, they'll trust the king instead. They'll take their eyes off God and they'll put their eyes on the king, looking to the king for guidance and safety. But when you hear this warning in 1 Samuel chapter 8, Samuel doesn't really mention that in his warning. We'll come back to that, but even though that is something that is concerning, Israel would need to be careful not to let their king go in the place of God. It's also true that God wasn't actually against them having a king. Way back in the book of Deuteronomy, where God gives Moses the law, so the law again is the rules for living as God's people, God also gives them rules for what a king should do and what kind of person the king should be. He actually shows them and tells them, this is what your king should be like. So it seems like God always had plans to give his people a king. One day. So what's the problem now? And why did Samuel give this kind of warning? Well, if we think about a king's job, what is it? What is the king's job? Maybe give you 10, 15 seconds, whisper to the person next to you, what do you think is the job of a king? Great. I don't need to hear your answers. I'm just going to tell you. A king's job is to make sure that things are right and good. And that is inside his country. If we think about the country as like a circle, the king's job is to make sure that things are good inside with the people and also in your country's relationship with all the nations around you. So a king's job is to take care of his people and make sure they're safe from any harm that might come from outside. The harm that might come from outside are things like war and other nations trying to take people and land and make it their own, stealing, right? Stealing. So when it comes to keeping his people safe, a king might need to lead an army to fight, or a king might need to make deals with other countries. Something like, just in this imaginary scenario, New Zealand is trying to invade Australia. And Australia might say, we'll give you 50,000 gallons of our best wine. I don't know how much wine that is. I just pulled a number out of my head. 50,000 gallons of our best wine and 10,000 of our best cows if you stop trying to invade Tasmania and steal it from us. All right? Those are the sorts of deals that a king might have to make. When we look at what was happening for God's people at this time, they always seem to be at risk of harm from other nations. The judges, so the kids have learnt about Gideon and Samson, who were judges, but there were others like Deborah. The judges of Israel were raised up to lead when they were needed, when danger and war came close to Israel. And even though God's people needed a leader who could help things stay right inside his country and keep good relationships with other countries outside, the people were most worried about the threats from the outside, about their safety when it came to other nations. What they wanted was a leader, a king, who could fight for them. They even say this after Samuel's warning in verse 19 to 20 of chapter 8 of 1 Samuel. They say, we want a king to rule over us. Then we'll be like all the other nations. We'll have a king to lead us. He'll go out at the head of our armies and he'll fight our battles. They don't trust God to take care of them. They don't trust that God has already been going ahead of them and fighting their battles. They want to be like the countries around them, the ones who have a king who uses violence to keep control. So where does Samuel's warning fit into this? This is where it all sort of clicked together for me. I think Samuel's warning is specifically about the consequences of being focused on war and fighting and international relations. That means keeping things friendly between countries. Think about what Samuel says. A king will take your sons. They will be forced to fight in his army, on the chariots, riding horses, and on foot. Some will be officers in charge of other men. Some of your sons will be taken to farm the king's land, to feed the soldiers. Others will be taken to make swords and weapons. The king will also take your daughters to make perfume. This is my little comment here, maybe to trade with other nations, or maybe we know that perfume and oils were used to treat the bodies of those who die. The daughters will also be taken to cook for the king and his men and his soldiers. The king will also take your possessions, your best fields and your vineyards and your crops of olives. This will be to feed his officials, his other leaders, and to reward them for their fighting. Samuel is telling them what will happen if they demand a king and become like the other nations. The people of Israel thought that this would save them. They thought that a king would keep them safe. But in the end, they will be the people who suffer. The word take is used a lot in that warning. The king will take from his people more than he gives. So even though Samuel warns the people, they decide they know better and they demand a king. So God gives them the kind of king they want. A tall, handsome, and strong man named Saul. Saul can lead an army very well. He wins a lot of fights. But when we read chapters 8 to 15 of 1 Samuel, what we learn about Saul is that he knows how to fight, but he doesn't really know God, and he doesn't really trust God. Saul takes on the anxiety and the fear of his people, of Israel, their fear that God isn't enough to keep them safe. And so everything he does comes out of that fear. He thinks he knows better than God and ignores God's instructions. You can read, and I would encourage you, and families as well, particularly because this is part of the curriculum, I'd encourage you to read 1 Samuel. It's one of my favourite books because it's just so exciting. But 1 Samuel chapters 8 to 15 show what Saul did that actually showed that he didn't trust God. So I encourage you to read that when you go home or this week. Eventually, Saul does something that he can't fix. God gives Saul an instruction, and Saul ignores that instruction. He keeps some things that were never meant to be his. And he says, it's okay, it's all good. I kept them so I could give them as an offering to God. But Samuel says this is in chapter 15. Samuel says, Saul, what is more pleasing to God? Burnt offerings and sacrifices or obedience? It is better to obey than to give an offering or a sacrifice. It is better to do what God says than to offer the offerings. You have refused to do what the Lord told you to do, so he has refused to have you as king. Saul loses the right to be king, and God starts looking for a new king, a man that will follow after God's heart instead of his own. The kind of king who will try to do what is right for his people, but most of all, what is right for God. After Saul, there was a better king named David, and that's who the kids are going to learn about next week. But even David wasn't perfect. None of Israel's kings were perfect until one man arrived who we call the snake crusher, the King of Kings, Jesus. Jesus lived a perfect life, obeying God and teaching people how to do what is right. He cared about people so much, but he cared about God more and always did what was right for God first. Jesus is the only king who gives more than he takes. He gave up his life so that all of the wrong things in the world can be made right. He fights for us too. He fought death and he won so that we can have life that lasts forever. But unlike Saul, Jesus knows God. Jesus trusts God, and Jesus always does what God asks him to do. So what does this mean for us? Like Israel, we can forget or choose not to follow God. We can make all sorts of other things king of our lives. Things or people that give us a sense of safety and control when we're afraid. Things like money or power or a certain kind of government or a certain group of friends or a certain job or being in a certain classroom or playing a certain sport. We even put ourselves on the throne sometimes and wear the crown ourselves. Like Saul, we give in to the anxiety of feeling like God is not trustworthy enough or powerful enough to keep us safe. But we have Jesus. Jesus helps us to know that we can trust God to keep us safe and to take care of us. Jesus is the King who makes everything right. The women who have been baptised today, they know this. By being baptised, they've told everybody confidently that they have made Jesus king of their lives. They've put Jesus back on the throne and crown on his head, ready to rule. Maybe God is asking you today, are you ready to make Jesus king of your life? Maybe for the first time, or maybe for the first time in a while. And you might feel some of that fear or anxiety about God being trustworthy enough. But if you feel that, I want you to know that you can trust God to take care of you. He sent Jesus, who died on the cross, but beat death and rose again. He did that. And because he did, we can trust him to take care of us. Let's pray. God, I'm sorry, and we're sorry for the times when we have put other people on the throne of our lives, or other things on the throne of our lives, or even ourselves on the throne of our lives. Sometimes, because we can't see you, God, it's hard to remember that you take care of us and that we can trust you. But you are more powerful than any king, any human king. And you sent Jesus to be our king, who is good, who makes things right, who is trustworthy, and who takes care of us. Help us to remember each day to put Jesus back on the throne, to trust him with our lives and with our hearts, and to remember that he is good. Amen.
Oh, Cynthia.